Well, hi everyone. Once again, it's Jill Tunkin here from Lifespan Partnership. I'm proud to introduce yet another partner of the Lifespan Partnership Program. And today I have with me Joel Ronchi from My Integrity in Practice. And for those of you who aren't aware, My Integrity in Practice is an education provider. And Joel has been working really hard with advisors who are obviously focused on the exam at this point in time. So welcome, Joel, and thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jill.
Awesome. Okay, well, look, I'll get started with the questions because I know
Yeah.
there's a lot out there swirling around the exam and the education requirements. I know a lot of advisors are hastily trying to combine, I guess, running practice, dealing with their clients, as well as obviously the education requirements. So let's start with the exam. So
Yep.
in terms of advisors getting prepared for the exam, are there any parts of it that have been more particularly challenging than other parts when you're dealing with advisors?
I think the biggest challenge in dealing with advisors in preparing for the exam is knowing where to start. So the question I always get is, where do I start? Most advisors are ready to tackle the exam. They want to get stuck into it, even with everything that's going on with COVID and the extension and all that kind of stuff, the deadline extension. They just want to get stuck in, and without guidance from a licensee or any kind of structured program, they're kind of looking at the FASEA recommended readings and going, well, here's a couple of thousand pages, a lot of it Corporations Act and legislation, where do I start? So that's kind of the conversations I usually have with advisors around what the first challenge is. That is, where do I start? What do I tackle? What do I look at? And then also just your basic things around, well, how do I prepare for the exam? Because a lot of the advisors that I'm dealing with are probably at the older end of the spectrum. So, when I say older, I'm talking about 45 plus. I'm in that bracket. So it's usually that kind of older generation who have been in the industry 10, 15, 20 years, probably haven't sat an exam for about that length of time as well. And it's really just a matter of kind of finding their feet, understanding where to start, and then getting stuck in.
Okay, great. So in terms of I guess, exam deadlines approaching, given we haven't yet seen an extension approved or
Yep.
passed in legislation, and I know you've shared this statistic with me in the past that only around 27% of advisors have actually completed the exam. Do you have any kind of concerns about that statistic and where to from here?
Yes and no. I suppose it's not a great answer, but yes and no, because I know just from speaking to a lot of advisors that there's a large bulk of advisors that are ready to sit the exam in June and August. So I can just sense from the conversations and the emails that I'm having that there's a big kind of cohort ready to come through. A lot of them, I think a lot of people thought the extension, the 12-month extension, was going to go through without any problems. Obviously, we've seen some issues in the last week or two around that. I still think it'll get across the line. I read something the other day about an ASIC order allowing for relief or something like that, but who knows what's going to happen there. But I think it'll get across the line. I think the reality is that I personally am not worried, but I think advisors should be getting on the front foot, and I've been saying this for a while now, getting on the front foot and having a crack at the exam, giving themselves about 8 to 10 weeks prep time. So if they're going to sit the June exam, then they should have started a few weeks ago. If they're going to sit the August exam, well, now or in the next couple of weeks is the right time to start prepping. So you want to go into each you want to target the sitting that you're going for, and then you want to kind of go 8 to 10 weeks before that, start preparing so that you can still have a life, still run your business, not get too stressed, and prepare in an orderly manner for the exam. So coming back to your question, yes, I think there's still time. I think people need to get their skates on. There's still a lot of advisors that need to get through at the moment with the proctoring and the online exam system. At least that means that FASEA has the capability to potentially put a lot of advisors through as needed, because as soon as it goes back to the on-site exams, for example, then you're obviously going to get restricted by capacity and space and all that kind of stuff. The other thing that advisors need to factor in, which is a reality, because roughly about 15% of advisors who have sat the exam so far have failed. Advisors need to factor in that resit, which, as most people know, you can sit the exam unlimited times. However, you've got to wait 3 months before the next resit, which when you look at the schedule, it means you've got to wait 4 months. So people just need to factor that in as well.
Okay. I think there's a lot of advisors out there who feel a little bit unsupported,
Yes.
feel like they're on their own. Do you have any words to share with those advisors? And, you know, does FASEA need to be a little bit more supportive here?
Oh, look, I definitely, I think so. I think in terms of FASEA and ASA, which is the body that's administering the exam, there needs to be a little bit more on the front foot. So, for example, the guide that came out recently about proctoring, that's great, but you kind of got to go searching for it. You got to kind of know it's there. So, yeah, I do think FASEA and ASA need to get on the front foot a bit more. I think licensees, like every licensee is different. But I think some licensees have kind of left it up to their advisors to work it out for themselves, not only the exam, but the higher education piece and all that kind of stuff. So I do think that, you know, the industry, the licensees and FASEA could do more. I always say to advisors, especially, you know, self-employed, they've got their own business, their livelihood at stake, that, you know, they need to get on the front foot. They need to be aware, you know, simple things like signing up to money management or IFA or professional planner or whatever it might be. So every day you're getting information into your inbox, usually, and, you know, those publications are usually across it really, really well. And that can then give you some really good insight into what's going on. So, yeah, I think that everyone needs to chip in a bit, but at the end of the day, it's the advisors who need to kind of take control of the situation.
Okay. So just with regards to the exam itself, what are some of the feedback points that you've been getting from those who passed, but those who also failed?
Yeah, one of the funny things, for lack of a better phrase, from both people who have passed and people who have failed, I've spoken to them, and they're both types of advisors have said to me, "I've got no idea how I passed. I've got no idea why I failed." So it's a really people come out of the exam feeling concussed, for lack of a better word. It's a very confronting exam. It's in terms of time, there's enough time. People always say, look, there's enough time if you manage time, okay. The biggest challenge I think all advisors face in the exam, whether they pass or whether they fail, is the ambiguity of the questions, the structure of the questions, the phrasing of the questions, especially if an advisor has English as a second language. It can be really challenging in terms of what is the question actually asking me. And also the other feedback that I often get is I'll get a question, I think I understand the question, but then when I go to the multiple choice, it's usually multiple choice or true false, they'll go to the answers and they'll look at it, and there's obviously two that are incorrect, and then there's two that are obviously one of them's meant to be the right one, but the wording is so close that they literally cannot tell the answers apart, and they kind of get insular in their own thinking. So yeah, it's I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's ambiguity, and just kind of feeling a bit overwhelmed coming out of it. The other thing that often I hear from people who have passed it is, I'm glad I passed it, but I don't really know why I had to sit that exam. It didn't make me a better advisor. It didn't teach me anything. It just meant that I passed an exam and met the next hurdle, which is a bit unfortunate because it should be, it should be a learning experience or some kind of beneficial experience for the advisors going through it.
Yeah, look, I agree with that. I've studied part-time myself, and I must admit I found the whole exercise really worthwhile and rewarding because it complemented what I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it actually taught me a little bit more than what I was learning on the job. So if you don't get study that does that, it can be a little bit harder to deal with, I think, as well.
Yeah, yeah. And when you throw in with that, the fact that if you do fail, you don't get any structured or constructive feedback from FASEA or ASA around where you did well or where you did poorly or anything like that. It's really unfortunate because I've spoken to a couple of advisors who have gone into their second sitting, sometimes a third sitting of the exam, and they're overwhelmed by the fact they've failed and they don't have any guidance as to how they can improve. and they're actually going into the exam blind. And I'd say in most cases, they go in feeling more stressed into the second or third exam, even though they've had the opportunity to sit the exam and they know the system and they know the styles of questions and all that kind of stuff, because they've come out of the other exam going, oh, well, I'm not sure, maybe I passed, maybe I didn't. But then when they didn't, they've just got no idea where they went wrong. And so what ends up happening is sometimes they can end up second guessing themselves. So coming back to one of your questions previously, if there's anything that FASEA and ASA could really do to step up and to help advisors, that is providing constructive and detailed feedback to the individual advisor if they fail. I mean, even if it's only if they fail, it doesn't need to be done for people who pass necessarily. But if it's someone who fails, then there should be individualized feedback to help them kind of be better prepared for the next sitting.
Yeah. So in terms of recognised prior learning, obviously there has been some goalposts moved a little bit. I think from conversations I'm having with advisors, some of the earlier restrictions have been eased. So what does that mean for most advisors in terms of subject credits that they might be receiving prior to going into their study?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, it varies from individual to individual, and this is I think one of the biggest challenges about the higher education piece. It's not one size fits all, or even kind of a blanket around a certain type of group. It's really one of those things where the individual advisor has to look at their education history to date, and then map that or look at it against what the requirements are. From experience, and again, I have to emphasize everyone's different, but from experience, it appears that there's a lot of people in the industry who only have to do one subject, which is the FASEA Code of Ethics Bridging course. There's also a lot of people who have to do 2 or 3 or 4 subjects. So I've also come across a fair number of people who are advisors who don't necessarily have a degree. They've done their DFP, they've been practicing for 10, 15 years, and now they find themselves in a situation where they have to complete a full graduate diploma of financial planning, which is quite an onerous qualification. That's 8 subjects, and so they've got to balance that with the timing of when they have to do that by, plus their exam. So I think sometimes advisors can get a little bit not think about the bigger picture, and so they're kind of focusing in on the exam, not realising that they may have a fairly heavy workload down the back end depending on their situation, and so they kind of need to time both of those. Some licensees are really good in terms of helping their advisors map out their higher education requirements, what kind of RPL they'll get, what kind of credit they'll get. Because as you said, the framework or the goalposts moved a little bit over time with CA accreditations or RPL and CPA RPL and all different sorts of RPL coming through. So again, it's probably one of those things where a lot of advisors have got it sorted. A lot of advisors probably haven't looked at it. And it's really the next challenge for advisors, because again, it's one of those things where if they've got a proactive licensee, great, they've probably got it all sorted. But I've come across a lot of self-employed advisors who don't necessarily have a proactive licensee, and they're kind of left to their own devices to work it out. Some of them are just guessing. Some of them are kind of having a quick read of the FASEA stuff, and some of them are trying to contact FASEA and get FASEA to kind of work it out with them. So yeah, it's an interesting one, that's for sure.
Okay, well, look, perhaps just a final question, because obviously you're very entrenched in the education space, and you're helping a lot of advisors through the exam and also through that recognised prior learning exercise. So perhaps, this is your opportunity. Tell us a little bit about My Integrity in Practice and what you do for advisors, and how you feel you can kind of add value through that process.
Yeah, okay. So look, at the moment, so My Integrity in Practice has been born out of my experience as an advisor, and also coming through the education space over the last 14 years or so. So it's really focused in on helping advisors understand and implement the FASEA standards. So that includes the exam, the higher education piece, professional year for licensees and advice firms that are looking to grow, and also just having a look at their CPD and all that kind of stuff. So at the moment, we offer programs around the FASEA exam preparation, so online and a webinar workshop type program. So that's the idea behind that, is to help advisors know where to start, know what to focus in on in preparation for the exam. We've got an online practice exam as well as part of those programs, which help advisors get kind of exam ready. And that's really useful for advisors who basically haven't studied for a long time or don't know where to start. We're also in conversations with advisors and licensees around professional year. That's kind of one of those things where it's second or third, probably third or fourth cab off the rank at the moment because of everything else that's going on. But it's one of those elephants in the room that's kind of going to sneak up on people. So we're just kind of talking through what the options are around the professional year, how it might be structured and so forth. I do individual consulting with licensees or individual advisors around mapping their higher education programs. So where are they now? What do they need to do to meet the higher education requirements, and how do they get there? So looking at different universities or different programs in terms of what they need to do. So that's pretty much what we're doing at the moment. And then later on this year, we'll be launching a CPD program as well.
Fantastic. Well, look, would you like to leave your website address or your email for anyone who might like to actually get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. It's the website is www.myintegrity.com.au. And if anyone wants to contact me directly, they can get me at Joel, Joel, at myintegrity.com.au.
Well, thank you so much, Joel. It was great to share an afternoon coffee with you. I think between us, we've had a few today. But look, much appreciated. Go Pies. You've shed a lot of light on the exam situation in education, obviously what you offer and what you're looking to offer down the track. So I look forward to working with you as a part of a Lifespan Partnership and the program and our self-licensee clients. So thank you once again, Joel.
Excellent. Thanks, Jill. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.